Alyssa Morgan had no choice but to sleep with the CEO of the company where she worked, in exchange for $20 million. Money she desperately needed to save her 6-year-old son, Ryder, who was in critical condition. Can you imagine the lengths a mother would go to save her child? One night with the CEO was the deal. She agreed, because her son's doctors were only waiting for her approval to operate. With the help of that operation, Ryder gradually recovered. But here's the twist: Dark Voices fans, the man to whom she'd given her body never let her go. In fact, he doubled the money just so he could share the bed with her again. She resolutely refused. Another reason, the CEO insisted, was that she resembled his deceased wife. Were these coincidences, or was the past forcing itself back into the present? "Morgan, your son's improvement is looking better each day," the doctor told her, smiling. "It probably won't be long until he wakes up." Alyssa smiled back and shook the doctor's hand. Her 6-year-old Ryder had developed bone cancer far too young, but by the grace of God, he was slowly recovering from the operation. "Thank you so much, doctor," she said, her eyes moist with gratitude. The doctor nodded. He knew the lengths she had gone to in order to save her son, especially since they had no wealth to speak of. Bone marrow transplants cost a fortune. But Alyssa had still found a way, even if her own body was the price. She would do anything for the child who was her only strength day after day. "We've moved Ryder to the ICU, Miss Morgan," the doctor went on. "I hope he recovers quickly and wakes up. Call me if you need anything. I'll be in my clinic." She thanked him again, following his departure with her gaze. "Thank God," she whispered. Her son had survived the operation. Now all she wanted was for him to wake up fast and heal completely. They had already spent months in this hospital. If it went on any longer, they might as well live there. Alyssa had seen other cancer patients in the ward and how they fought their own battles. She promised herself that if she ever became rich, the first people she would help would be cancer survivors and patients. This hospital had grown close to her heart after all those months staying there. Whenever she had a day off, she stayed with her son and the other patients in that ward. Suddenly, Alyssa was startled by the sound of her phone ringing. She quickly fished it out of her shoulder bag, then saw the name flashing on the screen. Stephen. He was the secretary of the CEO at her workplace, and his calls were nothing new to her. They had become friends, and he preferred people to call him Steph, but she still stuck to Stephen most of the time. "Hello," she answered, glancing toward the ICU window to check on Ryder before speaking. "Allie, why aren't you here yet?" Stephen's nervous voice echoed from the other end of the line. "Mr. Hawkins has been asking for you." "He seems really worked up," Stephen continued, sounding concerned. Alyssa exhaled. "It's my day off, Steph. Why is he looking for me? Can't I have some time off, even for a bit?" She was losing patience. Her boss, Michael Hawkins, hadn't stopped intruding on her life since they first crossed paths in the parking lot 2 months ago. The moment he learned she worked at his company, he transferred her department. She used to work in finance. She'd been perfectly fine crunching numbers there. But for reasons unknown, he suddenly made her his assistant, even though he already had Stephen as his secretary. It got worse after the night they spent together last week. Now he acted as if he practically owned her, monitoring her every move. Alyssa didn't understand why he was acting that way. She had a sneaking suspicion he was obsessed, but in fairness, he was undeniably handsome. Why was he so fixated on her when he could have any woman he wanted? She'd seen so many beautiful women coming in and out of his building: models, actresses, foreigners. Yet here he was, pulling her strings. Stay tuned, Dark Voices fans, because this story is about to take a darker turn. "Alyssa, he said it's important and he wants you in his office now," Stephen insisted. "He told me if you don't come in, he'll make things difficult for you," he added in a hushed voice. Alyssa felt her stomach clench. "Steph, I have something important here, okay?" she said, trying to keep her composure as she peered through the ICU window at Ryder. "I can't just leave him." Stephen still had no idea Alyssa had a child. In fact, no one at the company knew she was a mother. She wasn't the type to share her personal life. What was there to say? She only had stories from her late mother and no one else. If her mother had still been alive, at least Alyssa wouldn't be on her own at times like this. Please, Steph, help me figure this out. I can't just walk away. She didn't wait for Steven's reply. She hung up and turned off her phone so no more calls could come through. Then she went into the ICU, putting on a gown, mask, cap, and booties. She moved to her child's side. Ryder, baby, she murmured tearfully. Mommy's here. Wake up, sweetheart. She clasped his limp little hand, fighting the sadness that flooded her. Her once energetic little boy had become so thin with dark circles under his eyes. He'd lost all his hair. It shattered her heart every single day. You have to get better, baby, she whispered, placing a gentle kiss on Ryder's forehead. She was still standing outside the CEO's office when she heard a commotion inside. She raised her hand to knock, but stopped when she heard Steven's voice. She froze, listening to him. Yes, sir. Right away, sir, came Steven's reply, and then he practically bolted from the office like he was running from a lion. When he spotted Alyssa, he looked relieved. Oh, thank heavens, my savior, Steven exclaimed, voice trembling. Allie, go in there. Hurry. I swear if he doesn't see you, he'll have my head on a platter. Go, he pushed her toward the door. He's like the devil today, minus the horns. If it weren't for the high salary, I'd have quit already, he whispered, frantically gesturing for her to enter. Then he slammed the door behind her from the outside, leaving her completely alone with Michael Hawkins. Alyssa felt her heart jump. She turned and realized the door was now closed. Darn it, she muttered. Across the room, Michael stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass wall, hands in his pockets. From there, one could see the towering skyscrapers of Chicago. His building was 80 stories high, surrounded by other nearly as tall buildings. He was tall, fit, with a body honed from the gym, no doubt. Why are you only here now? His baritone voice resounded in the silent room, though he still faced the glass. Alyssa knew he could see her reflection behind him. She felt nervous, but she spoke up. I had the day off yesterday, sir, she said quietly, bowing her head. She noticed him turn around, his steps deliberate, his expression unreadable. Look at me when I'm talking to you, Ms. Morgan, Michael ordered. She stood straight and met his gaze, her own eyes widening a bit. He was so handsome, especially with that faint stubble. He apparently forgot to shave. But there was something unsettling about how he stared at her. She couldn't explain it. Her heart pounded madly whenever they locked eyes. I told you to come here yesterday, Michael said. What was so important that you forgot about your work? Alyssa clenched her hands. Sir, it was my day off, she replied in a calmer voice. Do you not understand what a day off is, sir? Or do you want me to live in your office so you can keep an eye on me? Is that what you want? She instantly regretted her outburst, but she was annoyed that he acted as though she had committed a crime. Surprisingly, Michael's reaction was subdued. Yes, I guess so, he responded. She gaped at him. She hadn't expected that answer, his lips tilted into a smile. Earlier, he'd looked ready to throw her out a window. She was too stunned to speak. What? What, she managed. Oh, good. You're still alive and intact. Thank goodness he didn't skin you alive, Steven teased an hour or so later, spotting Alyssa as she made her way to the cafeteria for lunch. She was pinching pennies now more than ever. She was still uncertain how many more hospital bills Ryder would have. She and Steven ate together at one of the tables. He'd gotten a bacon cheeseburger and a small salad, while Alyssa chose meatloaf and mashed potatoes. She had water with her to save money. At least I came out of his office in one piece, she joked, taking a bite of her food. Steven sat across from her. You have no idea what I've gone through. Yesterday he was in such a foul mood. He nearly fought everyone he ran into and kept telling me to call you. But apparently your phone was off, so he let me have it, Steven grumbled, rolling his eyes. They talked while eating, mostly about work. After they finished, they lingered a bit before deciding to return to the office since it was almost 1 o'clock. Michael was a complete perfectionist about punctuality. They were chatting and laughing down the hallway when Stephen abruptly leaned closer to Alyssa. "I have a confession. I find our boss kind of hot," he said, glancing around as if sharing a secret. "But he's too grumpy. Does he ever stop scowling?" Alyssa shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. She didn't like to gossip about her personal feelings. "He's not my type," she said. "He's handsome, sure, but he's always on edge. He's angry at the world for no reason." "Really?" asked a deep voice behind them. Both turned and froze. Michael was standing there, arms crossed. Stephen backed away nervously. Alyssa didn't speak. Her mind raced. Great. He just overheard me calling him angry. Michael's gaze lingered. Finally, he walked past them as though he couldn't be bothered. Alyssa felt embarrassed. Moments later, he said curtly, "You're coming with me to Florida." She turned, startled. "Why, sir?" "It's a business trip," he responded shortly. But Stephen is your secretary, sir," she argued, glancing at Stephen. "I want you there. No one else." Michael's tone was final. "No more excuses, and you can't refuse. Our flight is booked for this afternoon." Alyssa opened her mouth to respond, but he'd already walked off toward his office. She stood there in the corridor, dumbfounded. She had a son in the hospital who still hadn't fully awakened. How could she possibly leave? "Alyssa," Michael called from his office door, snapping her out of her haze. She followed him, tense with worry. "Sir," she began as soon as the door closed. "Maybe someone else can go. I'm only your assistant." He stared at her so intently that she stopped talking. "It's just 2 days," he explained. "And you've been at the company long enough to know the ins and outs of our finance department." His eyes trailed over her, making her feel uneasy. She swallowed hard. She could sense a different hunger behind his gaze. "Sir," she said nervously. He raised a hand, signaling that was enough. She turned around, her shoulders heavy with resignation. She felt dread at the thought of leaving her sick child. Alyssa returned to her desk, separated from Michael's by a glass wall that allowed him to see her every move. She tried to focus on the financial spreadsheets he'd asked her to finalize. Her phone buzzed in the middle of her work. She glanced quickly at Michael to be sure he wasn't paying attention. He was buried in his laptop. She slipped out of the office to answer. "Hello, Kayla." She used an upbeat tone despite the anxiety racking her chest. Kayla was the live-in caregiver she'd hired to watch Ryder when Alyssa couldn't be in the hospital. Kayla was from out of state, 23, and eager for a job to help her own parents. It was an extra expense for Alyssa, but she had no family to rely on. "Alyssa," Kayla said excitedly. Ryder's pinky finger moved. "I really think he's about to wake up." Alyssa felt tears of joy brimming. "Oh, thank goodness," she murmured. "Watch him closely, okay? Don't look away for a moment. This is so important." "Yes, ma'am. I'll stay with him. Don't worry." Alyssa gave a few more instructions before Stephen poked his head out of the nearby office door. "Alyssa," he whispered. "Mr. Hawkins is asking for you again." She quickly ended the call. "Okay, Kayla, text me if anything changes," she said. Then she hung up, took a deep breath, and went back inside. Michael looked at her the moment she entered. "Let's go," he said flatly. Her eyes darted to the clock on the wall. It was only 1:27. "Sir, I don't have any clothes to bring." "Can't I at least—" "Don't worry," he cut her off. "I've already handled everything. We need to leave now." She looked at Stephen, who smirked mischievously, as if to say, "Good luck." She frowned. "Yes, sir," she murmured, grabbing her purse. A short while later, they reached the building lobby where one of Michael's employees was waiting with 2 suitcases. "Load them," Michael instructed the man. Alyssa guessed one of them was meant for her. She tried to pull it herself, but Michael's hand stopped her. The brief touch was electric. It brought back those memories she kept forcing out of her head, memories of a certain night. She jerked her gaze away. "I'll take care of it," he said firmly. At the airport, a sleek black car was waiting to whisk them to the hotel. Michael spent most of the flight on his phone. Alyssa, meanwhile, sat quietly, her thoughts fixed on Ryder. Her heart panged, wishing she could remain by his side. By the time they landed in Florida, another car was already on standby. The driver wore a crisp shirt embroidered with the name of a luxurious resort. They drove along the coastline. Alyssa noticed thick clusters of pine and oak trees passing by. Fruit stands occasionally dotted the roadside. She pressed her face to the window, marveling at the scenery. "It's so pretty here," she whispered to herself. It reminded her that in another life she might have wanted to live in a place like this. Eventually, they arrived at Seaside Viewpoints Hotel, perched at the edge of a bluff overlooking the ocean. She was stunned by how picturesque it was, with a sprawling facade, 3 stories tall, likely over 100 rooms. The manager led them to a top-floor suite labeled Class A. As they passed other staff, women openly stared at Michael, and some asked to take photos. Alyssa found it odd that so many admired him while she followed a few steps behind. "Hello there," came a sudden greeting. A tall, blue-eyed man wearing a resort name tag tapped her shoulder. "May I know your name?" Alyssa blinked. She never finished because Michael abruptly appeared and grabbed her arm. He glared at the stranger. "She's with me," he stated icily. The man studied Alyssa. "Is that so?" Michael stepped closer, almost possessive. "Yes, that's right. She's mine." The stranger shrugged and walked away. Alyssa, on the other hand, glowered at Michael the moment the man was gone. "What's with the act?" "I'm not your property," she snapped under her breath. Michael leveled his gaze at her. "You're my assistant," he said. "So you can't just chat with random people without my permission." She frowned at his arrogant tone. "You don't own me, sir." He smirked. "I think you're mistaken. When you gave yourself to me, I claimed every bit of you." She could only stare, speechless, her cheeks burning with anger and shame. At last, they reached the suite. Indeed, it felt like first-class accommodations with a terrace that offered a sweeping ocean view. Below, people were jet skiing, riding speedboats, strolling along the sand. Yet Alyssa's stomach dropped when she noticed there was only one bed. She whirled on Michael. "Where am I supposed to sleep, sir?" He dropped his suitcase at the foot of the bed. "Right there," he said casually. "No way. I'll get my own room." "I'm not sharing this one with you," she insisted. He shrugged. "No, you won't." She bristled. "I absolutely won't stay with you." Michael stepped closer, voice low. "What's the problem? I've already seen everything there is to see. Tasted everything, too." Alyssa slapped a hand to her mouth, mortified. "Shut up. You're so crude," she hissed. He only gave a smug laugh. "It's the truth," he reminded her. "I said, shut up," she repeated, cheeks blazing. "Fine, I'll move to another room after our engagement here is over," he conceded. "Hurry up and get dressed." He tossed a white suitcase onto the bed. "That's yours." She said nothing, unzipping it to find a few dresses. All of them looked revealing, some more so than others. Flustered, she held up a low-cut one with a thigh slit. She muttered, "Who on earth picked these clothes?" She suspected Stephen. It was exactly his style. She settled on a dress that was only slightly less revealing. Pairing it with heels of the same color, she put on a light layer of makeup, brushed out her straight brown hair, then checked herself in the mirror. She had to admit it looked good, if bold. As she turned, she spotted the small heart-shaped birthmark on her shoulder. Her mother had once told her she was born with it. Over the years, she'd heard all sorts of theories, especially back in the rural town she came from, but she never got a straight answer. She shook off the memories when someone knocked at the door. Ms. Morgan, a hotel staffer, said when she opened it slightly. "Mr. Hawkins is waiting for you in the lobby." "Oh, okay. Thanks," she replied, stepping out. "You look lovely, ma'am," the staffer added, smiling. "Thank you," she said, heading for the elevator. As soon as it reached the lobby, she spotted Michael talking to a well-dressed woman near the reception area. Alyssa hovered at a distance, trying not to appear too interested. Michael seemed to be charming the woman. The woman giggled and leaned closer to him, obviously enamored. Alyssa rolled her eyes. "That's typical," she whispered to herself. "I bet he's forgotten me already." But a moment later, Michael's gaze snagged on Alyssa. He abruptly excused himself from the other woman, who looked disappointed, and headed straight for her. Alyssa bit her lip. "Why are you wearing that?" he asked bluntly, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket and dabbing at her forehead and neck. "It's air-conditioned here," she complained. "Are you implying I'm sweating from jealousy or something?" Michael ignored the question. "Didn't you have any other dresses?" She lifted her chin. "You think I'd choose this if I had another? Stephen must have packed these skimpy outfits." Michael simply watched her. "By the way, you look stunning." She only rolled her eyes in response and walked past him. The driver was waiting outside. She assumed they were heading to some event. He didn't speak much in the car. Instead, Michael tapped away on his phone. Alyssa gazed out the window, thinking of Ryder. She kept checking her phone in case Kayla texted. Eventually, the car stopped in front of a grand hotel hosting a charity gala. Alyssa followed Michael inside. It turned out to be a benefit for children with cancer. That struck a chord in her heart. Her own child had been battling bone cancer. It explained why the place was filled with donors, awarding ceremonies, and people in glamorous attire. She watched from the sidelines as the opening ceremony began. Michael mingled with important figures. She spotted him speaking to one of the event organizers, so she slipped away discreetly, seeing a chance to call Kayla. "How is Ryder?" she asked when Kayla picked up. "Ma'am, he's actually stirring. He opened his eyes a little earlier. He's going back to sleep, but the doctor says he might fully wake soon," Kayla said. Alyssa's eyes filled with happy tears. She wanted to jump for joy. "Thank you, Kayla. Stay close to him. Give him what the doctor recommends and call me if he wakes up again. Tell him Mommy loves him very much." Before Kayla could say more, Alyssa heard a familiar voice behind her. "Who's Ryder?" Michael demanded, stepping close. She nearly dropped her phone. He seemed angry. "Answer me, Alyssa. Who is he? Another man you're seeing? Your new lover? Is that it?" She stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Michael spun on his heels. "Never mind," he muttered, storming off. She watched him go. "So dramatic," she mumbled. "Fine, walk away." Rain started to drizzle outside, so Alyssa left the building and stood in the garden for a while, letting the cool air calm her. When it grew heavier, she decided to wait in the car until Michael returned. She climbed into the back seat, feeling her eyelids droop. The day had been exhausting, so she dozed off. In her half-sleep, she saw that haunting vision again, a dream she'd had countless times. A car perched at the edge of a cliff. A man's voice shouting, "Chanel, hold on. Grab my hand." Alyssa jerked awake, heart pounding. She always saw that red car about to fall. Always heard the same frantic plea. But she never saw the man's face or understood who Chanel was. It made no sense. She jolted to find Michael beside her, staring. "Are you okay?" he asked, uncharacteristically soft. "What time is it?" she mumbled instead. He didn't answer, simply tapped the driver's shoulder to start the car. Moments later, they were on their way back to the hotel. The ride was quiet. Michael barely looked at her, focusing on his phone like he was searching for something. By the time they reached their suite, it was late. Alyssa stepped inside, and Michael entered right behind, ordering room service for dinner. She slipped into the bathroom for a shower. The day's events weighed heavily on her. She couldn't stop thinking about Ryder or that strange dream. When she emerged, wearing only a thin towel because the nightgown in her suitcase was ridiculously sheer, she almost ran into Michael standing by the door. He stared unabashedly at her, his gaze intense. "I asked Steven for your personnel file," he said suddenly. "I found out you're originally from Texas." Alyssa tensed. "Yes. Does that matter?" Michael didn't answer that. Instead, he studied her as though her very existence was a puzzle. She felt a pang of fear. Did he regret giving her the money? Would he demand it back? That was impossible, right? He couldn't reclaim what he'd taken from her in exchange. "All right," she snapped, bristling. "Didn't you say you'd switch rooms?" Michael sighed and crossed his arms. "Why are you pushing me away?" "Because I don't want you here," she burst out. "And you have no right to just..." Suddenly, Michael tugged the towel off her body and tossed it onto the bed. Alyssa gasped, arms flying to cover herself. But he pulled her forward, pinning her to his chest. "Listen," he said in a deep voice. "I'm in charge here. So if I want to stay, I'll stay. And if I want you beside me, you'll be right here. Now, if you keep snapping at me, I'm going to lose control." She was too shocked to speak. He slammed the bathroom door shut, leaving her standing there trembling from adrenaline. Alyssa found her chance, grabbed the towel off the bed, and bolted out into the corridor. She stood there, heart pounding, ignoring the curious stares of a few passers-by. She felt humiliated and furious. "Calm down," she told herself, pressing a hand to her chest. Finally, the door opened. Michael stepped out, calmer now, and looked at her. "You'll catch a cold out here," he said quietly. "Come back inside." She refused to move or look at him, eyes down. "Don't force me to carry you, Alyssa," he warned gently. She swallowed. "Why should I?" she muttered. He walked toward her and took her by the arm, guiding her back in. She let him. Once inside, he closed the door. "Lower your voice, will you?" he told her. "You're so loud the entire floor can hear you." "That's embarrassing." She let out a harsh laugh. "You're embarrassed by that, yet you had no shame pulling that stunt on me a minute ago." He sighed. "I told you I was sorry." She turned away. "I'm leaving tomorrow." "I can't stand being here, especially when my son..." She bit her tongue, stopping herself from revealing too much. Michael exhaled. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolling through something intently. Alyssa crossed her arms, still seething over his touch, the way he tried to claim her as if she had no say. She wondered if she'd ever be free again. Her every thought returned to Ryder. Once he fully woke and got better, she promised herself she would never let anyone threaten her peace again, even if that meant confronting Michael Hawkins head-on. Alyssa Morgan felt her heart pound when Michael Hawkins approached her. She tried to step away, but he pulled her close. "She's my wife," he began. "And we'd only been married a month when the accident happened." He held his phone out to Alyssa, and the moment she looked at the photo, she felt an intense thudding in her chest. The woman beside him in that picture looked exactly like her. Alyssa couldn't speak. She just stared at the photo Michael was showing her. "It's been a year since she vanished," he went on, eyes clouded with a deep sadness. His tone was heavy with guilt, as though it hurt even to say those words. Alyssa simply listened, holding his phone in her hand. He leaned against the wall by the door, arms and legs crossed, his back pressed to the cold concrete. "There was no body. I saw nothing. That's why I can't accept she's gone. It's been 6 years since she disappeared. But I'm still hoping. If it takes my entire lifetime, I'll wait. Chanel is my everything." Alyssa stared at him, her hands trembling as she placed his phone on the bed. She stayed silent, even though a storm of questions was forming in her mind. He kept talking, and although she wanted to say something, she chose to remain quiet. Her heart pounded with inexplicable fear, maybe from what he was telling her, or perhaps because some part of her wondered if she herself was this Chanel. But no, she told herself over and over. It couldn't be. That was impossible. Michael only fell silent when the dinner he had ordered finally arrived. He stood and discreetly wiped his eyes. Seeing him do that made Alyssa's own heart feel like it was being squeezed. The boss she'd always thought of as sly, haughty, and hot-tempered actually carried a long-standing pain inside. He was hiding grief he'd kept for a very long time. They ate dinner together without speaking. Alyssa was starving. She hadn't eaten since arriving in Florida. After dinner, Michael left quietly, saying he was going to get another room. He seemed hesitant to go, as if waiting for Alyssa to stop him, but she didn't say a word. He ended up taking the room right across from hers. Left alone, she lay down to rest, never expecting to awaken in the middle of the night, shivering from the cold. Her head throbbed. She got up unsteadily to turn off the AC, feeling like she couldn't take the freezing air any longer. She spotted a first aid kit in the mini kitchen, so she took one Bafla tablet and one paracetamol, hoping the chills would subside faster. Despite wrapping herself tightly in a blanket, the cold still seeped into her bones. At last, she forced herself up again, deciding to go wake Michael in his room across the hall. She walked carefully, using the wall to steady herself because she felt like she might collapse at any moment. She reached his door and was about to knock, but the door turned out not to be locked. It was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, stepping inside. "Please, harder." "Ah, I'm coming. I'm coming." Alyssa froze where she stood, catching the glow of a lampshade on a bedside table. She could see a woman on top of Michael, both looking lost in pleasure. They were so caught up in what they were doing, neither noticed she had entered. "Faster, Heather," Michael groaned as the woman rolled her hips again and again, like she was in a trance. Alyssa clamped a hand over her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. She turned around and slipped out of the room as quickly as possible, wiping her cheeks in angry confusion. Why was she crying? She had no right to be upset, did she? Michael was her boss, not her boyfriend or husband, so why was it tearing her apart? She went back to her room and forced herself to lie down, still trembling with fever. If not for the awful headache and chills, she would have left the hotel right then and returned to Chicago. But she was too ill to travel anywhere. She hardly slept the rest of the night, waking now and then to wipe the sweat from her brow. Who was there to care for her? Michael was busy with another woman's body. Just hours before, Alyssa had felt pity for him, hearing about the wife he missed. This Chanel he claimed to love so much. And now there he was, having a fling. She felt disgusted. Let him chase his ghosts. Whatever Chanel was to him, Alyssa told herself she'd keep her suspicions to herself forever. Even if it turned out she was Chanel, she would never tell him. She'd be better off taking care of her sick child alone. She had always managed, and she could keep doing it without Michael Hawkins. By God's grace, her fever finally broke by morning, though she was still weak. Very early, she booked a flight back to Chicago. She was sure Michael was still asleep. She hadn't seen a sign of him in the hallway, and that was fine. She didn't want him to know she was leaving anyway. She dressed quickly, stuffed her things into her suitcase, and stepped out into the corridor. She had to pass Michael's room to reach the elevator. Just as she opened her door, his door opened, too. And out came Michael along with the woman from last night. "Babe, thanks for that wonderful evening," the woman purred. "Let's do it again later." They all froze, startled to find themselves face to face. Alyssa watched as Michael pulled away from the woman's clinging arm. "Where are you going?" the woman demanded. "Don't you want me to?" Michael glared. "Go. Get out." The woman huffed indignantly, giving Alyssa a once-over as if blaming her for Michael's abrupt dismissal. That made Alyssa roll her eyes. She headed straight for the elevator, ignoring both of them. "Where are you going?" Michael asked again. "Home," Alyssa snapped, yanking her hand free when he tried to grasp her wrist. "You could have told me," he said, sounding annoyed. She gave a bitter laugh. And how exactly was I supposed to do that while your eyes were rolling back in your head for that other woman? Let me go, sir. I can she cut him off. I don't need your explanation, sir. I'm heading home, and you're not going to stop me. Now, let go of me. Before she knew it, Michael scooped her up over his shoulder as if she weighed nothing. Michael, put me down. Alyssa fought to get free, but his strength was too much for her. Clutched in his arms, she found herself replaying the humiliating images from the night before. Even if some part of her once suspected she might be this missing wife, the new memory of him with someone else made her determined to hide any connection. She told herself, I've survived all these years without him. I can keep living without him. But then a stray thought struck her. Her child was 6 years old. The timeline, if she really was Chanel and had lost her memory, would that make Michael the father of Ryder? She covered her mouth at the idea, remembering how her late mother used to say Alyssa was impregnated by a man who abandoned her. Her mother never named him, and Alyssa never asked. She'd grown up believing he was worthless. She had never tried to find out who he was. If it were Michael, no, she refused to dwell on it. The moment they arrived back in Chicago, Michael was called to the company for an emergency. They never did finish whatever business they'd had in Florida. Once off the plane, Alyssa noticed it was already 2:30 p.m. She slipped away from Michael, determined to go home. Where are you going? He demanded, catching up to her brisk steps. Home, sir, she said curtly. He offered to drive her, but she didn't give him the chance. She turned on her heel and waved down a taxi the second she set foot outside the arrivals area. Alyssa, he called out, but she refused to look back. She was done with him and everything he put her through. She climbed in, shutting the door. 129, South Street, Catapunan Village, she told the driver. Only when she saw Michael disappear from view did she breathe a sigh of relief. The memory of what she'd seen last night made her furious, though she wasn't sure why she felt such a right to be angry. But angry she was all the same. She only stayed at her house long enough to change clothes and grab fresh outfits for Ryder. Then she headed straight to the hospital. The moment she opened the door to his room, he greeted her with a gleeful voice. Mommy! That sweet face was more than enough to chase away her anger. I see they've moved you to a semi-private room, buddy, she said, setting down the fruit basket and paper bag of his clothes. Yes, Kayla said we just transferred over, Ryder replied happily. He was sitting up in bed, looking much livelier than before. Alyssa rushed to him, hugging him tight, her eyes brimming with tears. God had been so good. Her precious son had made such strides. Mommy, the doctor said I'm getting better, he chirped. He still had dark circles under his eyes, was thin, and had lost his hair from the treatments. But Alyssa only saw her beloved child. Yes, honey, she said. You're healing. I'm so proud of you. She couldn't hold back her tears. Every time she thought about the pain he'd gone through, it hurt her 1,000 times more. If she could have taken it all onto herself, she would have done it without hesitation. But here he was, smiling, awake, still fighting. It made her heart overflow with gratitude. Mommy, why are you crying? I'm better now. You don't need to be sad, Ryder said, giving her a curious look. She could only sob harder as his little arms wrapped around her. I love you, Mommy, he whispered. Thank you for taking care of me. I love you too, my baby, she said, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. Get all better so we can finally go home. In the weeks that followed, Alyssa's routine was simple. Work by day, hospital by night. Kayla would watch Ryder during the day, and Alyssa would relieve her in the evenings. She'd grown close to other young cancer patients in the ward and often read them storybooks on her days off. It was so rewarding to see their smiles. Through all of it, she tried her hardest to forget Michael Hawkins, to block out the pain and confusion he brought her. One afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she heard a familiar voice behind her. She quickened her steps, but Michael snatched her arm, forcing her to stop. Are you avoiding me? He hissed. Several people in the lobby looked on, so Alyssa jerked her arm free to avoid a scene. I'm leaving, sir, she said, walking away again. But he followed her to the parking area. About what happened in Florida, he began. You know, I'm just a man, and I have needs. She spun around, furious. Right. You're a man, so you have to use someone whenever you like. Is that it? She narrowed her eyes. I don't care about your explanation, sir. Leave me alone. I'm not mad about it. I'm thrilled, actually. At least now you have a new woman to occupy you, and I'm free from your mess. She turned away and got into a taxi, glimpsing Michael rushing toward her car. But she told the driver, St. Anne's Hospital, please. And refused to look back. On the way, however, she noticed a familiar black car trailing behind. She stared at it in the side mirror. It kept pace no matter where they turned. Feeling uneasy, she gave the taxi driver new instructions. Sir, turn left on that next street, then go around the mega supermarket. We'll head to the hospital from there. Ma'am, are you sure? The driver asked, confused. Yes, she said in a tight voice. She watched the black car follow their every move, so it was definitely tailing them. She suspected it was Michael. She didn't want him finding out her real destination, or worse, discovering Ryder. She took another quick turn, telling the driver to deviate again. The man began to protest. Ma'am, that's not the way to the hospital. But she insisted. He shrugged and complied. Suddenly, at one intersection, a 10-wheeler truck came barreling toward them, seemingly out of control. The driver of the taxi jerked the wheel to avoid a deadly impact. The taxi smashed straight into a concrete wall. Alyssa's world exploded into a deafening noise. She felt a heavy blow, then heard only the ringing in her ears. Dizzy and in pain, she slowly realized blood was trickling down her forehead. Her entire body ached. When she looked at the blood on her hand, something triggered in her mind, a memory, like a dream. Hold on. Don't let go, Chanel. Please don't let go. The face of a man, also bloody, also clinging to life, flashed before her eyes. Michael. He was calling her wife, begging her not to let go of his hand as their car teetered on the edge of a cliff. She saw herself covered in blood, one hand clasped with his, the other gripping a side mirror to keep from falling. No, no, no. Please don't let go, he was screaming. She could practically feel the seatbelt half torn, the weight of the car pulling them downward. If you don't let go, we'll both die, she remembered herself yelling. Everything was chaos, her vision dark with panic, but she forced her hand free, ignoring his frantic cries. Chanel, don't. Wife, please. No. No. Alyssa, hold on. Another voice again. Michael's. Don't close your eyes, Alyssa. Don't you dare pass out. She heard him struggling to open the crushed driver's door. I'm coming for you. Just hold on. All she could do was surrender to the darkness. She dreamed she was at a wedding altar. I do, Father, she murmured, turning to face her groom, Michael, smiling in a black suit. She could feel his lips pressing soft kisses to her hands. I love you. I love you so much, my wife, he whispered. But the church decor began dissolving like melting wax. The guests became ghastly figures, eyes bleeding, flesh decaying. She turned, terrified, to Michael, who was staring back at her with horror. Until death, he rasped, covered in blood. His face seemed to rot before her eyes. Alyssa jolted awake in a panic, drenched in sweat. Her head pounded. She glanced around at the white ceiling and realized she was in a hospital bed, and four in her arm, bandages on her forehead. She lifted her arms, wincing at the scrapes and bruises. She stared blankly, recalling the crash. She'd lost consciousness after the taxi slammed into the wall. And now everything, absolutely everything, came flooding back into her mind. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The truth was too big to ignore. She was indeed Chanel, and Michael Hawkins was her husband. The doorknob turned. Alyssa quickly dabbed at her tears, lay back, and closed her eyes, pretending to sleep. She heard footsteps approaching. "Why did you come back, Chanel? You're too stubborn. God must love you a lot to have saved you so many times. But now, I'll make sure this is the end for you." Alyssa recognized the voice instantly. It was Heather, the same woman she had once trusted. Alyssa felt the pillow next to her head shift. "He'll come back to me the moment you're gone forever," Heather said, pressing a pillow near Alyssa's face. Alyssa snapped her eyes open and grabbed Heather's wrists before the pillow could smother her. She shoved with all her strength, sending Heather stumbling. "I knew it. You caused that accident 6 years ago, Heather," Alyssa shouted, her fury overriding the pain in her head and body. Heather glowered. "Oh, so you remember now. I thought you were just some nobody Michael met in Florida. Turns out you really are her. My best friend." Heather sneered at the last two words. "I guess your head injury made you remember everything, but it's too late now because I'm pregnant with Michael's baby." Alyssa's heart lurched. Did that mean Heather and Michael had been sleeping together all this time? Alyssa felt tears threaten to fall, but she forced them back, refusing to appear weak. "Even if you are Chanel," Heather continued, "you have no power here. I won't let you destroy my relationship with him." She laughed just as the door swung open. Immediately, Heather placed the pillow back by Alyssa's side and tried to act innocent. "Heather, what are you doing here?" Michael asked, suspicious. He saw the pillow in her hands. Heather hurriedly put it down on Alyssa's bed and mustered a smile. "Here, I was just helping her get comfortable." Alyssa glared. "Get out," she said icily. "Tell your girlfriend to leave." Heather pouted. "Babe, come on. I just got here. I have good news." "Not now, Heather," Michael muttered. "But babe, I just wanted to get a checkup, and then I saw you here, so I said leave." He shoved Heather toward the door. "Babe, I'm pregnant, and you're the father," Heather cried out. Michael froze, glancing at Alyssa. Alyssa looked away, her heart in pieces. "Both of you, get out," she ordered. She stood, despite her throbbing head, and corralled them out before slamming the door behind them. The moment she was alone, she burst into tears, feeling her heart rip apart. Everything was rushing back, along with the memory of seeing him in bed with Heather in Florida. She pressed a hand to her chest, hurting so badly she could hardly breathe. An hour passed before Michael came back. Alyssa was on the phone with Kayla, checking on Ryder. She ended the call the instant he entered and tried to compose herself. She spotted her bags on the sofa. Maybe a nurse had brought them up.